Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. The long-running debate about managing brumbies in the Kosciuszko National Park has become toxic, with many on both sides fearing to speak up. It's estimated there are as many as 14,000 horses in the park, too many for the fragile environment. But Brumby advocates dispute this figure and say the horses should be protected. A New South Wales draft management plan is now months overdue. National Regional Affairs reporter Jess Davis has this story from the High Country.
The Brumbies of Kosciuszko National Park inspire deep emotions.
You know, the Brumbies are the last little bit of that heritage that's left. And that's why there is such an intense feeling about it. And of course it is emotional for us. You know, what more can they take?
I'm a horse lover. I've ridden horses all my life, just love horses. They're absolutely beautiful creatures, but I don't think that's got anything to do with the fact that they should be allowed in our fragile high country.
Once a rare sight, their populations have boomed in recent years, and glimpsing the wild horses is now a common occurrence.
Not long ago I did go for a ride in the hills and couldn't believe it. There were just brumbies everywhere. Right, Jess, come through and we'll have a cuppa.
June Wilkinson was born and raised in the foothills of the Snowy Mountains. She has a rich family history.
That is my grandmother pouring tea with that teapot, and that is Banjo Patterson.
Wow.
And all my great uncles enjoying tea from the teapot.
Wow. She's a relative of the famous poet, and her family grazed their livestock on a snow lease inside the park during the summer months.
My father made good use of having us children to do the droving up into the high country. It was much talked about if a brumby was even sighted, and I actually was always hoping to see one but never did. So it's a little bit different now.
June is concerned about the impact the horses are having on the national park and the need to control numbers.
I just can't believe that anyone could think that they could just go on breeding forever. And I'd love to ask the people that are against doing anything about them, what do they think the final outcome could possibly be? And it just seems wrong to me that the wild horses are protected when there's so many threatened animals up there that are being kept on life support.
Nice looking
Richard
shopper.
Swain also grew up here in the mountains. He spent the last few years campaigning to protect the park from horse damage as the Indigenous ambassador for the Invasive Species Council.
This is an area we chose to protect. We chose to take hard-hoofed animals off this country to protect it for the future, and this is what we're doing with it.
Horses are found across nearly half of Kosciuszko National Park, and while they look stunning, they damage vegetation, cause soil erosion and impact waterways.
This is meant to be a spring. It's meant to be really slow-moving water, and they basically caused all that erosion and depleted the spring's vegetation.
Counting horses is difficult in this rugged country, but scientists say the best way to do so is by air. The most recent survey by the New South Wales government estimates there are around 14,000 horses in the park, compared to just 3,000 in 2002.
It's just been gradual, particularly since 2003. It's just they've hit a critical mass and they've taken over, and every time we've tried to implement control, the people protested.
But those in favour of protecting the Brumbies question the numbers and the horses' impacts.
We think that the numbers are certainly flawed. They're absolutely absurd. We'll never believe that they're the numbers.
Lisa Caldwell has been campaigning to protect the Brumbies for years and is a member of the New South Wales Government's Wild Horse Community Advisory Panel.
We ride in the areas that they are saying that there's 10,000 horses and we don't see them.
So why should we believe you and not the
Why
scientists?
is it that scientists or academics are given more credibility because they've gone to university for a few years, against people that have lived here for generations.
It's a real challenge because people have different perceptions. A lot of people don't accept the number of horses that are actually out there in the park. So you end up with this endless debate in the community about fictitious numbers.
Dave Darlington spent decades working in the park, first as a ranger, then as the regional manager, before retiring in 2013.
We had high hopes of solving this feral horse or wild horse problem in Kosciuszko, and clearly our efforts, my efforts, have failed.
There have been multiple attempts to deal with the problem in the past and reduce numbers. In 2016, a wild horse management plan was attempted, but it never made it past the draft stage.
It's really, really sensible. It was based on science, and it came up with a suggestion that a population of about 600 horses could be retained in Kosciuszko National Park. Now, politics overturned that plan.
New South Wales Nationals leader John Barilaro opposed the plan, preventing it from being implemented. And in 2018, he introduced the Wild Horse Heritage Act that now protects the Brumbies.
What is in front of the House today as a bill is one that has had the contribution of so many over decades, one that I'm proud to have, of course, tabled to the House.
It was met with wide condemnation from scientific groups who saw it as prioritising an invasive animal over native species, but was welcomed by Brumby advocates.
If you realise how important it is to the local people, the people here with so much vast history were kicked out of the mountains. They had their cattle and their livelihoods taken from the mountains, and they see over time so many other concessions made for others, like the ski resorts and now Snowy 2, for example, and all the damage that's caused by those things. Rocky.
For people like Lisa Caldwell, the Brumbies hold a special place in the history of the region.
I guess, in a sense, the Brumbies tell our story.
The Brumby has been immortalised in Australian literature, with Banjo Patterson's famous poem The Man from Snowy River, and later the Silver Brumby novels by Elaine Mitchell. They're a symbol of local identity and the old high country way of life, but not everyone in the community agrees.
It's not a subject to bring up at a dinner party. Yes, I think they find it very hard to let go of the old times, but I think it's a bygone era and it has to be accepted.
The debate is toxic and aggressive. Many landholders and locals told the ABC they wouldn't speak on the record for fear of retribution, with reports of death threats, vandalism and abuse.
I entered this argument publicly because I saw what happened to one of the head rangers who was trying to get the 2016 plan across, and I saw what happened to his children, and so I decided that people do need to speak up about this. My 85-year-old mother's been abused in the park in Cooma by some horse people. My daughter, she was only 15, they wanted to fight her. And the social media stuff has been terrible. I've had death threats and all.
5 years later, another management plan has been drafted. Whether it will ever be implemented is the big question. Bringing the two sides together will not be easy, but they do agree in principle on protecting alpine regions.
We've conceded that alpine areas, real alpine areas, should be kept horse-free. We agree with that.
But there's a but.
But the horses are not in those areas.
However, scientists say the evidence of detrimental horse impact is clear.
Mostly what we find is where horses occur, grasses are grazed down to quite a low level, depending on how many horses in the area, of course. But where there are no horses, say in the central areas of the park, grasses can get quite dense and thick and quite tall. And that tall vegetation and dense grassland is what really provides great habitat for the native species.
Renee Hartley has been surveying horse numbers and their impacts across the park for the last 3 years.
All right, so these are our survey sites, and you can see that horses occur in the north, the south and in the east. So the impacts that we've seen in the grasslands that we've measured have been related to horses.
And there's not many pigs on here, there's only a few sites?
No, We found very few pigs. Less than 10% of our sites had evidence of pig activity, and that's not because they're not a problem, but because there's an effective control program going on. Right. Similarly for deer.
Yeah.
The problem we have is that campaigning has prevented effective horse management.
She says there's a growing body of evidence that native species like the broad-toothed rat, the corroboree frog and the she-oak skink are losing their habitat because of horses.
There's plenty of scientists, myself included, who love horses. It's not about being anti-horse, it's about being pro-native species and ecosystem health. It's really unfortunate that we're in this position, but we are, because we introduced horses to these areas and we have delayed management for a long time, and now impacts are getting severe.
One way of reducing horse numbers in the park is by catching and rehoming them, using trap yards like these ones. But it can't be done in great enough numbers to even keep pace with population growth. With the draft management plan expected to say more than 10,000 need to be removed, that means other methods like ground or aerial culling may need to be used. Brumby rehomers like Nikki Alberts don't like the thought of shooting horses.
They're very interactive, they love people, and they're not the big bad guy.
She moved to this property in Adaminaby near the northern end of the national park a couple of years ago and has been taking Brumbies in and training them ever since.
Hey bud. So this little guy I'm keeping as well.
Hello.
And as you can see,
They're very friendly.
they're very friendly. Yeah. And we just put the hard work in and out in the mud and slop because we love them and we're crazy.
Nikki has rehomed 47 Brumbies, including foals born here, but says the rehoming effort can't keep up with demand.
Definitely not with the pace that they're coming out. So there's been a lot of new rehomes start up over the last 18 months and they're doing a fantastic job. But just the sheer numbers we can't keep up with.
She's concerned about what will happen if horses need to be taken out of the park in bigger numbers.
It won't be a good outcome for them because they will end up in slaughter, and it's a shame because, as you've seen, they're amazing animals and they do deserve better.
Until 2016, horses that couldn't be rehomed were sent to an abattoir. That was the fate of more than 80% of horses trapped. But that option was removed, making rehoming the only control method. Aerial and ground shooting of horses hasn't been used in New South Wales since 2000 because of the public's opposition to it, despite the RSPCA supporting it as a humane way of reducing feral horse numbers.
I don't think that too many people here will compromise on shooting.
Others believe shooting the horses is the only way to deal with the problem.
They have to be, like any other animal that's out of control, brought back to be in control.
And so they have to be shot?
They have to be shot, of course they do.
I would like to see Australians fulfil their role as custodians, and we've got the highest mammalian extinction rate of anywhere in the world. I would like to see aerial culling where it's required and trapping where it's required. I would like every tool in the toolbox.
The ACT shoots Brumbies as soon as they cross the border. Victoria also plans to introduce ground shooting of horses. Pressure is mounting on the New South Wales government to release its plan.
This management plan needs to be brought into the light of day and needs to be implemented on the ground.
Federal Environment Minister Susan Lee has threatened to intervene.
In looking seriously at draft regulations, I am going as close as I possibly can to making that demand as regulatory as possible and really making what I hope is a strong and important point about a failure of process by a state to protect national heritage in its national park.
In a statement, the New South Wales Environment Minister Matt Keane recognised there were too many horses in the park and said the plan will be released for public consultation soon. But there seems little hope from either side that this time will be different and the issue can finally be resolved.
I just hope we can find a way through this for the conservation of Kosciuszko National Park, but also to put bring the community more together on this whole issue.
That is
absolutely impossible with the way emotions run so high. I'd like to think that it's an optimum outcome for the Brumbies and for the park as well.
I think Banjo Patterson would be absolutely horrified if he were to come back and see what's happening now. He just hated the fact that horses were having to be rounded up and destroyed, but he said it just had to happen.